The Vietnam War ended 50 years ago today with Operation Frequent Wind, one of the largest rescue missions in U.S. history. At the center of it all was the USS Midway. Retired Commander Vernon Jumper, a San Diegan, was the air boss in charge of flight operations during the harrowing 30-hour operation. Back in 2020, I got the rare opportunity to sit in primary flight control with him. Tonight, we share that story with you again as he describes the events of April 29th and 30th, 1975, which he calls a true miracle.
To me, it is. It is a miracle because it was the most dangerous 30 hours I'd ever seen on an aircraft carrier.
Memories of Operation Frequent Wind.
The chaos, the complications involved were just tremendous.
Are crystal clear for 88-year-old Vernon Jumper.
I was so frightened that one of these helicopters that were so low on fuel may flame out and crash on this flight deck.
A full-scale emergency evacuation had been ordered.
45 years after the evacuation of Americans and at-risk Vietnamese from Saigon, the retired Navy commander shares his story as a volunteer on the same ship.
And people appreciate the story so much.
Vern was the air boss of the USS Midway, and from this seat, he called all the shots. It was in this tower in April 1975 where Vern watched over the intense 30-hour operation with laser-like focus, responsible for every takeoff and landing.
What did you see when you looked out from this perch right here?
When I looked out, the flight deck was covered with people and helicopters, of course. At one time, helicopters came up and they were hovering alongside the ship, and they had less than 5 minutes of fuel remaining.
You're almost eye to eye with them right here.
Almost eye to eye.
At one point, he counted more than 20 South Vietnamese aircraft waiting to land on the crowded flight deck. Some pilots hovered just long enough to unload their passengers, then headed to the side of the ship where they jumped out wearing life vests as their helicopters went down.
All of a sudden, I saw this little 01 bird dog.
The pilot dropped a note on the flight deck asking if he could land on the runway, adding that his wife and 5 children were on board.
I immediately ran this note up to Captain Larry Chambers, our commanding officer at the time.
The decision was made to push more than $10 million worth of helicopters over the side of the aircraft carrier to make room.
He made a beautiful carrier landing without a tail hook.
The flight deck crew surrounded the family and cheered.
And they were just whooping and hollering. They were so proud that they'd saved their lives.
They're my heroes. They're always going to be my heroes.
Courtney Herman was only 8 years old when she and her family of 12 stepped onto the Midway, along with her aunt and cousins.
They saved us. They saved thousands of people now that have better lives.
She remembers sleeping on the flight deck because the space below was full, knowing they were finally safe.
What does this flight deck mean to you?
Freedom.
But she knows not everyone was able to leave.
My uncle that stayed back, he was tortured many years because of his military status.
Courtney has deep gratitude for the U.S. involvement in the unpopular war.
If they weren't involved in the war, I wouldn't be sitting here on this deck today.
I knew Don Brown, Bud Lynn.
Vern says he will never forget his fellow pilots and aircrewmen who paid the ultimate sacrifice and died in the war.
It's so sad to see their names on the board.
But he takes comfort in the success of the humanitarian mission he helped lead on the USS Midway.
It's the proudest moment of my life that we saved 3,073 souls and nobody lost their lives.
Again, that story first aired 5 years ago. Vernon Jumper served as a docent on board the USS Midway Museum for 2 decades, sharing his incredible stories. His family tells me he retired from that job a couple of years ago, but he still loves sharing his stories. In fact, I've stayed in touch with his daughter Julia over the years, and yesterday I got a chance to meet up with the retired commander in his backyard. I asked him what he would like people to remember as we mark 50 years since the end of the Vietnam War.
The main thing I want people to remember is that the people did not die. That's the most important thing. Everything else is subordinate to that.
I know it was very stressful.
It was stressful, yes.
During the operation, but after it was all said and done.
After it was all said and done, we accomplished something good. We did. We saved some lives. And I'm very proud of that. I'd do it again in a heartbeat, but they won't let me. After my name, it says 93, so they won't let me do it again.
And we, of course, thank you, Vern, for your service and all the stories and the people who got to hear his stories firsthand on the Midway. I mean, how special was that?
Very special, and it's good to see him doing so well. Good to see him so connected with us still.
Yeah, his family told me they were going to take him to dinner last night to mark 50 years. And I asked him, does it feel to you like it was 50 years ago? And he said, no, it feels like it's only been 10 years that have passed. I mean, at 93, he still has those vivid memories of those 30 hours.
I couldn't even imagine, just such an intense period of time. You would think that it would be imprinted on you for life. You really do.
And on this April 30th, 2025, and on this day, April 30th, 1975, that Vietnam War ended. And I just, on a personal note, my father served in the war at Vietnam, my late father, and I just, they came home to very unpopular sentiments, and just to now being able to see them getting their recognition and being able to share their stories and being honored means a lot.
Yeah, we've done a lot to work on that healing. Still more to be done, but it's good to see that we've put all the work, including things like the honor flights, which we saw another one last week, and Vietnam veterans being taken to Washington to get some healing and get a big welcome home on Sunday in San Diego. I love that they do that.
Love that.